Welcome to Imperfect in an Uncertain World, resources for living with authenticity and purpose. Today's question is, how flexible and open to change are you? In other words, how resilient are you? Let's talk about mending a resilient heart. Gosh, that word resilient. Do you find yourself embracing change? Do you find yourself being a little resistant? Do you find yourself feeling stuck? All of those ways would describe how resilient you are, from being highly resilient to being not resilient, being fairly inflexible in what you're doing. So, resilience is all about asking yourself, how flexible and open to change are you? And as I slip from one year into the next, I'm increasingly more aware of, how stuck I am in my ways, or how stuck I can be in my ways, how resistive I am to change, because change is hard. There is no doubt about it. Change is very, very difficult. And you know what? Whenever I'm resistive, that not so little voice inside of me asks, are you ready to atrophy? I shudder. Man, who wants to atrophy? Then it reminds me, you've seen people who are stuck in their ways. Heck, you've even been stuck in your ways too many times to count. Do you want to be the person who stubbornly clings to what isn't working because you're afraid of change? Yeah, that voice can be harsh sometimes. So I scoff. Of course not. But honestly, it's all too easy to be that person who stubbornly clings to what is. I can convince myself that to move to the rhythm of change is just too hard. Sometimes, more than I want to admit, I am resisted to change. But the resistance is born from the fear of what if. Then I have to tell you, an amazing thing happened. One day I woke up, and so it's not like you wake up in the morning at 4:30 or 5 o'clock with your aha moment. I had this epiphany that had nothing to do with waking up from sleep. I noticed how I was getting stuck in the mundane, the rote. I noticed that while I wasn't particularly happy, my emotional state was not enough to jar me into change, to take those chances that would bring me into a new way, to be flexible and resilient. Then a not so little thing happened. When I didn't exercise, I noticed how stiff I was. When I read only fiction, I noticed how difficult it was for me to identify logical patterns. And when I became a hermit, I noticed how difficult it was for me to engage others. My conclusion: these activities contributed to a lack of resilience. Too stuck in my ways, I had become inflexible. Now, I realized how my lack of resilience was impacting the whole of my life. I hadn't just isolated parts of myself, body, mind, spirit, and emotions. My inflexibility impacted the whole shebang. I recognized that if I continued on this path of rigidity, what my future would hold, and it wasn't real pleasant looking. So, peering into the future, I saw the possibility of my life and what it would look like in 5 months or 5 years if I refused to change. So, as my awareness increased, I began to notice how I reacted to anyone who suggested change. I identified my resistance, and then I trained myself to notice how my body reacted to potential change, what flitted across my mind, and what emotions were roused. I noticed what was likely to shut me down. Next, I reminded myself to identify the fear, the uneasiness, the uncertainty, to breathe through my resistance that I had identified, and to learn to say to myself, tell me more, and listen to the response. Because more often, when I said, tell me more, and I listened, that was enough to untangle the inflexibility that fed my resistance. So, from this mindfulness practice, and that was a pretty simple mindfulness practice, I shifted from being stuck in what was to being open to possibility. I discovered that while I do not always say yes, I am resilient as I dig into the why of my no to discover if I am resistant to change for the sake of change, or if my intuition is telling me to tread lightly. And that's a biggie, because not only I need to decide if the inflexibility really is an inflexibility, but a boundary. So maybe I'm not as resilient as I would like to be, but I am now able to use my wisdom to choose which change I will integrate in my life and which change is not possible in the moment. And that is the power of my resilient heart. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. As a contemplative coach, I would love to work on you, help you learn some mindfulness techniques, and really strengthen the connection to your intuition so that you are more resilient and there are ways to mend your resilient heart. More resources are available at vanessafhurst.com, and I would like to say to you, thank you again for listening. Whatever you do in your life, find ways to be more resilient. Namaste.